Turn now actually to breaking news. The judge in Donald Trump's civil trial has now issued a ruling in that civil fraud case. Teams are currently reading through all the details right now. The decision could cost the former president hundreds of millions of dollars and potentially wipe out the family business in New York. Let's take it straight to our David Muir.
The former president and his sons for the exaggeration of the values of their real estate holdings in order to receive benefits for loans and insurance purposes, according to New York's Attorney General. I want to bring in John Santucci, has covered the Trump family for years. And John, first look here at the damages here. When it comes to Donald Trump, we know Letitia James had asked for $370 million in damages. What did the judge rule?
So far, David, our team's quickly done some math. It appears the former president is on the hook for $354 million, obviously below what Letitia James was seeking after these months of proceedings that happened in downtown Manhattan, but nevertheless a significant amount of money. David, as our team is pouring through this ruling from the judge, it also appears that Donald Trump's two eldest sons, Donald Trump Jr. and Eric Trump, who were running the company while their father was in the White House, both boys, David, on the hook for $4 million apiece. Now, the other part of this ruling from the judge, 92 pages that our team is pouring over at the moment, it says that Donald Trump cannot do any business related to real estate in New York for 3 years, and each of the boys, each 2 years apart, can also not do business in New York. David, in talking to sources around Donald Trump for the last couple of days, there was a little bit of optimism among the Trump family that maybe the boys would not be built into this ruling with Dad because of some of the comments that the judge had made over the weeks-long proceedings, that maybe the boys would be held out of it. That could be a way to keep the company going, if you will. Just basically take everything that was under Donald Trump and slide it to his children. But this ruling, David, makes that impossible. It means that Donald Trump and the boys cannot do business in New York. And I can tell you, David, that one of the things that was being considered amongst Trump Tower is if that was to happen, what would happen to all of the employees of the Trump organization? That has been a big concern, David.
So let's just bring the audience back up to speed here. John, stick with us here because, again, the judge here in New York City in the civil fraud trial against Donald Trump has now handed down the ruling, the damages here. And as you heard John just report, our investigative team pouring through the decision from the judge. Initial read of this shows that the former president, Donald Trump, has been fined $354 million for civil fraud. Letitia James, the Attorney General in New York State, had asked for $370 million. The judge coming very close to that, $354 million. As John just reported there, it would appear at this point that each of the eldest sons, Don Jr. And Eric Trump, have both been fined $4 million each. So do the math there. That's 354 plus 8 million gets you up to 362 million or so in damages against both Donald Trump and his two sons. And as John points out, all three of them, according to initial reads of the ruling here, have been prohibited from doing business in New York State for several years to come. That's your read as well, Aaron Katursky?
David, this is not ruinous for former President Trump, but it is incredibly punishing because he, his children, executives at his company have been held liable for a decade's worth of business fraud. And the judge, in addition to enjoining them to prevent them from doing business in New York for a few years, has also taken aim at all of Trump's defenses, writing that total repayment of loans does not extinguish the harm that false statements inflict on the marketplace. Trump had said, no harm, no foul. I paid back the loans. The valuation of real estate is more art than science. But the judge writes that New York means business in combating business fraud, and indeed the common excuse that, well, everybody does it. The judge says is all the more reason to strive for honesty and transparency and to be vigilant in enforcing the rules.
All right, stick with us here. I want to put this up on the screen, this graphic. The control room can help me out with this. An example of one of the properties, Mar-a-Lago, which everyone knows. Not only were these New York properties, and many of them are established properties, people would know them in New York City and even beyond. But look at Mar-a-Lago. They had claimed that Donald Trump said Mar-a-Lago was worth $600 million. The appraisal in Palm Beach for that same property, the assessed value, was just 27 million. So again, saying anywhere up to 600 million was the value, when in actuality it was 27 million. And this is what the Attorney General was getting at, Aaron, is that that kind of exaggeration, even if the argument is who did it hurt, well, the Attorney General said it hurt the marketplace, other businesses in the marketplace. And if the average Joe or Jane out there in America can't inflate the value of their home or their business, then Donald Trump and his sons shouldn't be able to either. That was the argument.
That was exactly the argument. You and I can't lie about our finances to get a mortgage, so Donald Trump shouldn't be allowed to do it either. And there were repeated examples, not just Mar-a-Lago. There was his Fifth Avenue penthouse apartment in Trump Tower. On his financial statements, former President Trump tripled its size and therefore its value, said it was 30,000 square feet. It was about 10,000 square feet. His Seven Springs estate in suburban Westchester County, north of New York City. The Trumps said it was $261 million. The assessed value is below $30 million. And these exaggerations, the judge said, are not mere mistakes. It's not just differences of opinion. It's outright fraud.
When you talk about how many years they've been prevented from doing business in New York, I'll bring this back to John Santucci. It wasn't for, you know, the rest of their time. Actually, as businessmen, when you look at these, the age of the sons, obviously, when they're told a couple of years each prevented from doing business. But Donald Trump, and there's been a lot of focus on the age of the candidates in the race for president, both President Biden and former President Trump. When you're talking about Donald Trump, whether he wins or not, if he doesn't win, being prevented from a number of years from doing business, that would be a substantial punishment as well, just simply given his age.
Yeah, obviously, David, and obviously, you know, the Trump Organization, what it looked like in 2015 is very different than what it looks like now in 2024. I mean, Donald Trump talks about the golden escalator ride he took when he lived in Manhattan. Donald Trump is no longer a resident of Manhattan, moved his, obviously, his life down to Florida. All of his children now reside in the state of Florida. They all at one point lived in New York. David, I can tell you, just as you were coming to me, I was hanging up the phone with Eric Trump, one of the president's sons, obviously, who was a part of this ruling by the judge here in New York. David, Eric Trump telling me that the ruling, in his opinion, is a total joke, called it insane, said it feels like, David, they're living in an alternate universe. And David, one of the things that Eric Trump pointed out to me just now on the phone is that, you know, as he testified under oath, he remains and continues to stand by his testimony that he does not recall, you know, ever believing any of the information he was signing off on was fake, was altered, was any type of scheme. So obviously, as we expected, and Eric Trump just confirmed to ABC News, the Trump family, David, is already saying they will appeal this decision by the judge, and obviously we'll have to see how quickly they move on that.
And what's their defense? I'm sure you didn't have time to get into it on the phone, but when you talk to the sons, for example, this argument from Letitia James that they were operating in some sort of alternate universe, that's the allegation here, that they were inflating assets in a way that the average American just isn't allowed to do.
Yeah, and David, their argument is that they maintain that they ran a clean business. They point to, you know, different sales and transactions they've had that have been a success. One of the things that Donald Trump and both his children have pointed out to me over the years is the recent sale he had of the old post office, David. The former president making over $400 million on that sale after he had refurbished the old post office and eventually sold it to Hilton. So that's one example they point to, David. These were properties that were sought out by others when they did sales. They also recently point to a golf course here in New York that they sold for New York residents, the one where you drive over the Whitestone Bridge. They recently sold it to one of the casino giants for, I'm told, just under $100 million, David. So that's the success that they point to. These were properties and assets people wanted, so thus, in their mind, the evaluations that they attached to them were legitimate.
One quick question, John, for you before we move on to the rest of the team here and then get it back to our stations across the country. When you're talking about $354 million in fines for just the former president alone, put this in perspective. How much money have they spent, has the former president spent on legal bills already, the number of cases that he now faces while he's running for president? And how much of this money is actually coming from people donating to the campaign, actually footing the bill for these legal bills?
David, a lot of it. I mean, if you look at calendar year 2023, when you, Aaron, I, all of us were on the air going through the series of indictments, Donald Trump was expanding how many lawyers were on his payroll. And we know, David, because of those campaign finance reports that just came out over the last couple of weeks that we reported on the show with you a few weeks ago, that Donald Trump and his team have spent over $50 million on legal fees, on attorneys. Some of the attorneys, David, that worked on this case, the New York Attorney General's case, made millions of dollars directly because of their work for Donald Trump. And you have to recognize, David, look at just the last few weeks of coverage we've been reporting here on ABC. Donald Trump's legal troubles, we know the courts at the moment, right? Manhattan, Georgia, the 2 federal probes. But look at just a couple weeks ago. Donald Trump's team was in New York, it was in the Supreme Court, rather, focused on the 14th Amendment appeal. New lawyers were brought on for that. Special attorneys that were barred to appear before the Supreme Court. You got to know, David, they too were dipping into the campaign cash.
Not only that, but the E. Jean Carroll case in recent weeks and the amount of money fined in that case as well. A lot of people are going to start adding up these kinds of numbers and simply ask, where is this money going to come from?
Yep. Absolutely, David. And I think that's the thing. Look at where it has happened every time Donald Trump was indicted as a key example, right? We did it together 4 times, David, on the air. Donald Trump was indicted. They came out with a statement. Shortly thereafter, an email blast came out to supporters, fundraising, trying to pull in funds. Donald Trump's team bragged about the millions of dollars they raised after each indictment. And, David, that money that was raised, all 50 million of it, went to pay those bills.
John Santucci with us. John Karl, our chief Washington correspondent, also with us. And, John, there was a lot of focus just on this particular case alone and Donald Trump's behavior in that courtroom, admonished by the judge, fined by the judge along the way, and it figured into this decision.
It sure did. And David, before I get to what the judge said about it, just think about it. He spent upwards of 10 days in that courtroom. He testified. He would come out and give his daily press conferences. He was using the courtroom as a way to be part of his campaign. But look what the judge said about Trump's testimony in this case. Overall, Donald Trump rarely responded to the questions asked, and he frequently interjected long, irrelevant speeches on issues far beyond the scope of the trial. His refusal to answer the questions directly, or in some cases at all, severely compromised his credibility. So Donald Trump's time inside that courtroom in the midst of a presidential campaign, using it as a way to boost his political prospects, it appears hurt his legal prospects. Again, the judge saying that his testimony, very strong language here, severely compromised his credibility. And one of the things that Trump talked about constantly in those press conferences, it seemed to be fixated on, was the value of Mar-a-Lago, because he was accused of overstating the value of Mar-a-Lago and insisted that it was worth well over $1 billion. This ruling takes some time to explain why that is simply not true. The judge explains that although Trump said Mar-a-Lago was worth between $1 billion and $1.5 billion today, he said that the judge says that would require valuing it as a private residence, which the deed prohibits, and it would have to make it the most expensive private residence listed in the county, Palm Beach County, by approximately 400%. And the judge explains, and this is important with the Mar-a-Lago property. Again, I mention this because this is something Trump has been fixated about, talked about not only in his appearances outside that courtroom, but talks about it in his campaign rallies. Trump signed 2 agreements with the government regarding Mar-a-Lago to limit his tax exposure. One was a 1995, a deed of conservation and preservation, where he gave up the right to use Mar-a-Lago, he or any other owner, for any purposes other than a social club. And a secondary deed, another deed in 2002, where he gave away in perpetuity the right to develop or use the property as a single-family residence. So that enabled Trump to significantly lower the taxes he would pay at Mar-a-Lago, but it means you can't subdivide it and put a bunch of homes, private residence on there, which is what you would need to see the value being as high as it is. But look, bottom line, Trump has used this case and the other cases on and on and on for his campaign. But in the courtroom, the judge sticks to the rule of law, sticks to the ruling, and is saying that that Trump has actually hurt his own credibility with his own statements.
John, let's just talk bigger picture here politically, because we've seen the polling that Americans, when they're polled, who they choose, and obviously we're still far out from Election Day in the race for president, but when they talk about a conviction on some of these criminal counts, and again, this is not one of those cases. We are still awaiting the Jack Smith trial, the trial in Georgia, the hush money case here in New York. We see how the polling suddenly shifts when people are asked, would you vote for a convicted felon? Now, in this case, this deals with another part and a huge part of Donald Trump's image, which is what he's really worth, what his businesses are worth, what he's worth as someone who prides himself in decades of doing business here in New York and beyond. When you see him called out, if you will, by this judge for grossly exaggerating the value of his properties and now being held accountable, and again, the numbers here at this hour, Donald Trump has now been fined $354 million in this case. Both sons fined $4 million each, which takes you to about $362 million. Donald Trump and his two sons have been fined for exaggerating the value of their real estate. Does this poke holes in that image for those who support Donald Trump? Obviously too soon to know, but again, this is a big part of the image that he presents on the campaign trail.
Well, Trump's entire political life is an outgrowth of his contention that he is the greatest, most successful business genius, that he is fabulously wealthy because he is fabulously successful in business and would bring the same business acumen to the government. But what you're seeing here with this incredible judgment, again, accusing him, first of all, of exaggerating his wealth, but also getting to the point where there's a real question whether or not he could even pay these fines on top of the fines that he is forced to pay in the E. Jean Carroll cases, not to mention all of the legal bills which John just went through and that he is using his political fundraising to help pay for. I mean, Donald Trump's image as a incredibly successful, wealthy businessman is also very much what was on trial here and very much in question right now. Can he pay this? Now, I have to say, the other thing that strikes me here, David, is that this decision, coming so closely on the heels of the E. Jean Carroll decision, and before we get into the criminal cases, but this decision comes just as Donald Trump has solidified his almost total control over the Republican Party. He is come out and he's pushed for a replacement at the RNC. Ronna McDaniel is going to be leaving. Trump's choice to run the RNC is all but certain, likely to take over. He has said that he wants his daughter-in-law, Laura Trump, to be the co-chairman of the RNC, and has said that the purpose of the Republican Party, its entire purpose, everything that it must do, must be focused on one thing, and that is electing Donald Trump the President of the United States. Now, one question that this raises is, Donald Trump, while he was president, used the RNC to pay his legal bills. Once he became a candidate for president and wasn't the only Republican candidate, that ended because the RNC technically can't take sides in a Republican primary. But what's going to happen now? Is the Republican National Committee going to be yet another engine, an engine he may really need to help keep on top of these finances, faced with these massive fines and massive legal bills all at the same time.
You speak of this pause from the RNC during this primary process, but in the meantime, as John Santucci pointed out, John, by and large, Donald Trump supporters in the country are paying many of these legal bills for him.
I mean, it's small donors. It's it's donations that come in, often less than $100. Working class people who have taken to fully believe his argument, his contention that he is a victim of a witch hunt, that everybody is out to get him, and he says they're out to get me because their real target is you, and I'm the one standing in the way. And it's that they have raised tens of millions of dollars, and as John went through, much of that money has gone to pay Donald Trump's legal bills. But by the way, the RNC's money also comes, comes in some cases from wealthy donors, but also, comes from small-time donors, the people that you see that go to those Trump rallies and have been going for years. In many ways, those people that show up and to cheer him on at his rallies are the ones that are tapped to pay his legal bills. But now, I mean, the legal bills, as huge and massive and accumulating as they are, that's just the least of it. Now you have, this judgment, which they're going to appeal, just like they're going to appeal the latest in the Eugene Carroll case. But this is the kind of money that could face somebody in a position like Donald Trump's to have to liquidate all of their assets to pay. Donald Trump says he is a multi-billionaire. Well, he's going to need to be to pay what he's being fined here.
Yeah, these are extraordinary numbers. The Eugene Carroll case and now this case here in New York, the civil fraud trial. John Carl, our thanks to you. Again, the breaking news at this hour, the judge in this case, Judge Engoron, fining Donald Trump $354 million, just more than $354 million in the civil fraud trial. Each of his sons, Don Jr., Eric, each ordered to pay $4 million for exaggerating the wealth of their business holdings in order to get better loans, to get better insurance policies, the kind of thing that the Attorney General had argued everyday Americans cannot do, and if they do, get in trouble every day for this, and that Donald Trump should not be above the law, was her argument all along.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.